Major support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Colonial Life, providing benefits to employees to help them protect their family, their finances, and their futures. And Sonoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Schools and summer vacation, different sides of the same coin, and certainly indivisible from each other. Welcome again to the most widely watched and longest running program on Carolina business, policy, and public affairs seen across the Carolinas for 28 years now. I'm Chris William, and thank you for supporting our dialogue that long as we find our way into summer travel, into summer vacations, into activities. It seems appropriate to reflect on schools and their deep connection to economic development. We will start that and other issue dialogues in just a moment. And later on, he is the chairman of the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina. Frank Emory joins us again.
Gratefully acknowledging support by Martin Marietta, a leading provider of natural resource-based building materials, providing the foundation upon which our communities improve and grow. Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, an independent licensee of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association. Visit us at southcarolinablues.com. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. BARINGS, a leading global asset management firm dedicated to meeting the evolving investment and capital needs of its clients. Learn more at barings.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Scott Baier from the John E. Walker Department of Economics, Clemson University, Ben Kinney of Business North Carolina, and special guest Frank E. Emory Jr., Board Chairman of the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina.
Hello, welcome to our program. Ben, good to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Dr. Baier, welcome back.
Good to be back.
Gentlemen, let's start with something that just happened here. And when I say just happened, the last 3 or 4 weeks, Charleston has an event called Dig South, and it's a conclave of technology, thought leaders, finance, ideas, et cetera, that kind of come together in the Holy City. And Scott, don't look at him because you're going to get this question too there, buddy. Like, I'm not going to answer this. And then FinTech Generations just happened in Charlotte. So we've got Charlotte and Charleston with these ideas around FinTech, InsurTech, Dig South. Ben, you guys did a fairly extensive story in Business North Carolina recently about this, but what is this? You know, I don't want to demean the term, but is this just a kind of a side bet around high tech and growth and entrepreneurialism, or is there something else going on here in the FinTech and InsurTech area?
I think that it was our cover story in the last issue, and I think that we are seeing it getting the attention that it deserves, but it's an industry, a portion of the industry that's really flown under the radar. There's a couple reasons for that. One, it deals with some very sensitive issues. You know, electronic transfer of funds, cybersecurity are all a part of that. And the customers, it doesn't really tout what it does. It's very, it keeps everything very close to the chest in terms of showing what they do to the outside world, and especially covering it is extremely difficult. But they're also, with that industry itself, is pretty conservative from that standpoint. So it does not tout its own horn, and I think that's one of the reasons for it. I think you can't ignore it now. Mm-hmm. I mean, if there's big companies like a SageWorks that's out in the Triangle. It's been doing it for a long time, very successful with it. In the Charlotte area, you can't drive through, you can't drive down 77 without seeing the Avid Exchange Music Factory, which is the centerpiece of FinTech here in Charlotte, or one of them and such. So it's just a very big business, and it's just getting the attention now that it's due.
Scott, does it hit your radar in the upstate?
Well, not so much in the upstate, but looking more broadly, we noticed that these startups are really important for driving productivity growth. And one of the things we've seen in the last 20 years is a decline in business startups. But as these things pick up, again, in North Carolina, around the area, again, it leads us to believe that there's going to be better growth and productivity in South and North Carolina.
switch to trade and tariffs. The pitch between the U.S. and China seems to be getting higher, seems to be getting more acute. Is this the same type of increased risk to those who export and import in the Carolinas? And I think specifically the agribusiness.
Well, I think, yes, it is a big risk. At least initially with the first round of tariffs, I think consumers have been kept away from it because mostly the tariffs that we've levied and China's response have been on intermediate input goods, and so that's cut profit margins some. This next round of tariffs, this increase in 25% that we just saw, and then the next round, you're going to see consumers more hit by this. So I think the consumers in South Carolina and North Carolina are going to be hit. Moreover, because it's also hitting intermediate producers, it's going to have the effect of slowing down some productivity growth. For example, South Carolina's imports from China last year were down 10%. In autos, it was down 26%.
Now, they sound like big numbers, but because China is a major trading partner with the Carolinas, top 5, at least maybe top 3, that this has a big impact, or am I putting words in your mouth?
It has a big impact. It will have a big impact, especially looking forward if we extend this tariff wars to including autos and auto parts more broadly speaking, with 25% tariffs. What the auto industry really fears is how this is going to disrupt value chains and how you're going to manage this risk and uncertainty in inventories. It'll be a real challenge for the states, for North and South Carolina.
What bubbles up to your gang when you in the magazine and the contacts that you have?
From our standpoint, agriculture is obviously going to be is impacted from that standpoint. But just shooting the breeze around with the other editors there, I wonder if it's until it really hits consumers in the pocketbook, are they really going to notice it? Because it's been so much rhetoric in the media in terms of pumping it up and making it look like the worst. The thing with the Mexico from last week, I believe, just it went through and acted like it was the end of the world on the national media, and everybody kind of just nothing happened. Everybody kind of shrugged their shoulders and went on with their daily lives.
Well, so will this be hyperbole until it actually manifests itself?
Well, here's what I haven't seen yet. When the economists have looked at the data and they've looked at the tariffs, it's almost completely being passed on to the producers, 1-to-1. But yet that hasn't shown up getting passed on to the consumers. At some point, you're going to see it move into the consumers,
so, right?
Or it just can't keep. The margins aren't that big for it to keep cutting on margins.
Okay. All right. Let's move on. Ben, one of the big things going on in the Carolinas is a consolidation of healthcare providers, hospitals coming together, new alliances. This is happening in South Carolina. This is happening in North Carolina. What's your read?
From our coverage, it's incredible, and the amount of activity that's going on with these systems and the daily news feeds that we get, the press releases and things like that are incredible. This is something that in the past one would happen a year, something major and things, and now we're getting stuff like almost on a weekly basis, just in terms of developments. And if you look at, I think if you looked at a map of North and South Carolina and kind of looked at with these different healthcare areas that are moving into other areas, merging, making partnerships with smaller hospitals in urban areas, it looked like the beginning of Game of Thrones. That kind of a map and stuff like that. Now, I mentioned that to our editorial staff the other day, and they all looked at me with blank faces because none of them watch Game of Thrones.
Like a cow looks at a new gate?
Yeah, exactly, without a doubt. But that's almost what it is, because it's just happening so fast. It's just these different alliances and such. We're dealing in the West with Asheville Mission Hospitals.
And the HCA.
HCA took over that. The results of that is an incredible trust now called Dogwood Health Trust, which is almost $1.5 billion dedicated to helping healthcare services and providers in Western North Carolina, which is going to be a really big deal down the pike.
Greenville Health, Palmetto Health in South Carolina. Vidant and ECU, how much more acute is that argument going to be?
It's a little bit of a turf battle going on there. So and ECU's kind of caught in the middle, I think. You have UNC Healthcare, which is basically going into some of these smaller hospitals, and that's a whole rural argument in terms of these smaller hospitals in these smaller towns and rural areas of North Carolina can't be self-sufficient as much anymore.
Right.
So UNC Hospitals is moving into some of those areas strategically to partner with them and give them the services and support that they need. That's Biden's area.
Yeah.
That's a turf war going on
so
right
that's
there.
not going to, there's not going to be an easy solution there.
It'll be interesting to watch.
Scott, about a minute left, and not so much about the healthcare thing, but Ben brought up the good point about hospitals can be good economic generators in small and rural communities. Of course, they're tend to be public agencies, but what happens when those hospitals start to consolidate and there are less healthcare options and employment in rural communities?
Well, I think that, that is the issue, that once they start to consolidate, the variety of services and potentially the quality may not be there. The quality may not be there, but the variety may go away. And if they get smaller in terms of employment, well, these hospitals support a lot of other services in the area, generally speaking. So yes, it can have quite a negative impact on employment in the area outside of just the hospital system.
Is it an acute issue, or is it just something you're watching closely?
It'd be something that we watch more closely.
Okay, all right. We'll bring our guest on in just a moment. Speaking of healthcare, we're going to get to that in a second, but John McConnell has been stringing together some pretty good golf courses to make, of course, McConnell Golf, but also make a string of golf courses that you can play on if you're a member of one to another. We will host John McConnell again on this program and talk about affordable housing has risen to the top of agendas in urban cores like Charleston, Columbia, Raleigh, Charlotte, et cetera, et cetera. We will talk about affordable housing here in the region. And then Dr. Patrick Cawley, chief in charge down at MUSC, will be our guest on this program. Sometimes, unless you're a political insider or in the industry of, if that's an industry, economic development, just the term itself can make people's eyes glaze over. Well, during these latest General Assembly sessions in North and South Carolina, lawmakers are further advancing the idea of this very close, inextricable relationship between economic development and education. Joining us now is someone who knows that intimately. He is the chairman of the North Carolina Economic Development Partnership. We welcome back Frank Emory. Mr. Chairman, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Frank, do you get the sense that there is a renewed understanding, excitement, and commitment to this linkage between economic development and education in North Carolina specifically?
I do, and I'm glad to see it. I think it's spurred by the competitive juices that we have in our state when we see other people getting jobs that we wish we could get. Every prospective employer that we talk to, the conversation generally starts and ends with, what's your workforce like? And how prepared are they? Can they do these jobs? It's no longer the strength of your back, but it's, what depth do you have, and can you run these machines or write these programs? Mm-hmm. So yes, that's a huge deal for us.
So when you came from a rural community, came from Wilson, North Carolina. With that in your kind of your DNA and your programming, and you talk about now this rural economic development challenge. I don't know that it's a crisis, but certainly a challenge, to say at minimum. Mm-hmm. How does that whole conversation between economic development and education and incentives, how does that play out in your head?
Often, to start with. So here's what we're doing about it. We're trying to foment a good conversation. And so what we've said is, let's put all 100 counties in North Carolina in play every day. What is it that we know we need? And so since we're talking about workforce, we begin to think about where we get the people from. And so we start talking now to our partners in the university system, in the community college system. And for example, we're having this fall a consortium on workforce development and preparedness down in Lee County in Sanford for just that purpose, inviting people to come in. So it's on people's minds. I think it's almost a case now where, like somebody said, when I have more help than I can stand, everybody has an idea. Now we've got to figure out how to focus it and make some things go forward.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Frank, the board that you represent is very diverse in terms of different areas. So you have one member of your board represents an area that is trying to land a Fortune 500 headquarters, and you have another one that is trying to land a poultry processing plant, to come in there. How do you find common ground among those folks to move forward?
That's a great question. I'll tell you, well, I hope the answer is yes, we have done it.
Yeah.
And here's what we're doing. We say, okay, look, any win for one is a win for all. So if the poultry plant makes a difference in Lee County, for example, then what the board says to the staff is that's vitally important for all of us. The other way we do it, frankly, is by ensuring that the economic incentives for the people who work there are tied to wins in Tier 1, right. Tier 2, and Tier 3 counties. So we want to make sure that it makes not only a theoretical difference, but an actual difference in how it goes for them. But keep in mind, the stronger smaller communities are, the better the prospects are for the larger communities. Those folks want to go places to spend money and right. go to Panthers games and things like that. So the more, and frankly, people, there are lots of folks I've learned who prefer to live in, an area with more wide open spaces and right. At a different kind of pace where they can park in front of where they're going to and that kind of thing. So, the healthier and the more diverse the choices we can give them economically, the more attractive our state becomes.
Right.
We mentioned a little bit about trade before, but in general, I think there's just general uncertainty coming from Washington and just overall policies. Absolutely. How has your group managed those policies or uncertainty, and how has the state been concerned about it? Does that rise to the level of?
It's still early days yet for us. I mean, we're watching it for sure. Ironically, about a month ago, North Carolina got awarded the U.S. Secretary of Commerce E-Award for our success in exports. And now we're talking about tariffs and showing those things down. I think that so what we obviously can't control the policy. What we're trying to do is everything we can to foment good alliances around the globe. Mm-hmm. We've got folks at the Paris Air Show this week, for example, really working on trying to let people know North Carolina is a great place to do business. But it's a red light on the dashboard for us. We're a little worried about it.
We talked a couple different ways around the idea of rural, urban. Mm-hmm. And I almost hate to use the term divide, that's just a personal preference, but the more we've had people talk about that issue, and even Patrick Woody from the North Carolina Rural Center said that, and I'm paraphrasing him, but he said this urban-rural divide is being miscommunicated. Yes, there are differences, and yes, there are challenges, but I didn't get the sense from him it was a crisis as much as if you understand the difference, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, Mr. Chairman, but there are differences between an urban core and rural setting. So how do we understand the differences there, and especially in EDP&C, how do you manage the different expectations, the different incentives, the different type of resources that need to be deployed?
Great question, and that's at the top of my list most every week. So what are we doing about it? Well, we try first to listen. So instead of showing up from Charlotte and saying, okay, Wilson County, we know, here's our plan for you. What we're trying to do is say, okay, well, tell us what your vision is and how can we support that? So for EDP&C, we try to make sure we've got the best people at our shop sitting down with the economic developers there and saying, let us help you achieve your vision of where you want to get to. And that seems to be working well, because what I've, even from my hometown, which I love to talk about, but I would drive in and say, well, I think we ought to 4-lane this and put an interchange here, and people say, no, what we really like is this. We want to have a park over here and do some things. So understanding that the people there have the best knowledge is job one, and then next try to get them the resources that they need. And so, when legislators are talking to us and, leaning on us about their particular parochial interests, we try to hear that and say, okay, let's make sure we're putting our resources and the ones that we can find where they need to be. Now, the one you mentioned, incentives, now that's a legislatively controlled set of things.
But not without its influence from Commerce and EDP.
Well, fair point. So people come and we try to help. What we try to do is help them understand the full array of what's available. I mean, so for rural jobs, because there are certain grants, for example, that are tied to small, for in Charlotte parlance, a smaller get or a smaller win than for headquarters, for example. So we want to make sure that folks are knowledgeable about that. But what you have your finger on, Chris, is exactly the art of what we've got to do. Some days we get it right, and frankly, I'm sure some days we could do better. Yeah. But that's what we're focusing on.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. In terms of economic development, how it's changed, and site selection consultants and folks are really looking at different things on their punch list when they're looking at a site. True. How has that changed over the years?
Well, tremendously. Just in the time I've been involved, there was a time when you would, say if you were a developer, a site selected consultant, you would take them around and drive them around and show them different things,
sites,
right?
Yeah.
Now they show up and say, we've done our homework.
Right.
And we want to see, these are our requirements, and we want to see this, this, and this. And we say, well, no, there's something over here. So no, we just want to see this, this, and this. And that plays out in a couple of ways. So obviously, we will show them what they want to see and make sure they go. But back to your question about rural, urban. So there are times when, I won't call any names because I can't, but say some company comes to see something. Right. And then I'll get a call from someone saying, you guys are not paying attention to my county because you took them to see this thing over here. And I keep trying to explain, the guy came in and said he wanted a three-piece suit. I can't show him swim trunks. He wants to see three-piece suit.
That's right.
So that's one big way. And then the other one, as you say, right now, huge now is broadband and digital infrastructure. If you don't have that, you're probably not in the game. Rail, natural gas, and large tracts. Right. And in North Carolina, it's getting harder and harder to find a large tract of land that has transportation infrastructure. I imagine South Carolina is the same thing as it gets more and more developed. Mm-hmm. So maybe in some, the thing that I've seen is that the buyers have become much more sophisticated, much more knowledgeable, and frankly, they have their own playbook designed when they show up. So we're now trying to get out in front of that and try to understand. Our folks are going to conferences and things and trying to see what do they now want so we can have our own catalog for them.
Have it there for them.
Yes.
Yeah. Scott, about 3 minutes.
So what do you think are, looking forward, are the best opportunities or the biggest opportunities or things developments that you think are going to be the best in North Carolina?
I mean, types of industry, you mean?
Type of industry and growth.
Well, okay, so, we're an agricultural state. I think that getting what I call technical agriculture, I think that's something North Carolina can lead in. I think, frankly, I heard you in your earlier segment, you were talking about healthcare. Yeah. I think we're blessed with a lot of great healthcare in our state. I think that's another area where we're going to be strong. And I'm hopeful that we can play in manufacturing, and high-tech manufacturing. South Carolina is in that game in a big way. We'd like to be in that one in a bigger way than we are right now.
Do you ever share best practice or good ideas with South Carolina to say, maybe 1 + 1 = 3 if we figure out how to do this together? Amazon being one.
Yeah, there is some of that. Yes. All the developers know each other. All the key people in South Carolina know us, and so we do that. And there are times when we may have to say, look, we don't have it here, but call them. Hoping that that'll be reciprocated, and I think it generally is.
I'll tell you something. This is a little bit flippant, but I'll tell you something. Your comment about how you all do share and know each other. Mm-hmm. I said that one time on the show to a North Carolinian, and he laughed about it. And then the South Carolinian said, "No, in North Carolina you all know each other. In South Carolina we're all related." And I didn't know how much credibility there was to that.
I'm not touching that.
Yeah, that's probably smart. And the man that said it, I wish I could say his name because that made it even funnier. We've got about 2 minutes left. Okay. It's almost not fair to ask you this one. How does affordable housing overlay into all that? And not just in the big urban centers, but affordable housing in small.
It's critical infrastructure, and it's beginning to be a barrier to what we can now do because it's still a workforce issue. Yes, I can get you the people. First I've got to train them and have them, but then they've got to have a place to live. More than 50% of the people who work in Mecklenburg County live outside, just to put that in perspective.
Because of affordability issue?
Well, I don't know, but I would imagine some of that's that. Yeah. You can only, look at, so think about that for a second and just play that out. So yes, if we don't get the affordable housing right, we won't be able to provide the workforce to support, not only because of the jobs, but because the people can't get to the jobs to do what, to support the industries we're trying to recruit.
Does that show up in not always the biggest markets, the affordable housing issue?
Oh yes, it is different. So we have lots of housing that costs too much. In rural areas, they don't have enough housing because there isn't the interest and the demand to build it. Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chairman Emory, thank you for being on the program.
Thanks
for your leadership.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm glad to be here.
Yes.
It's fun.
Dr. Baier, welcome to the program. Mr. Kinney, always nice to have you on the program.
Always good to be here.
We want to take just 1 second. We don't do this a lot and probably don't do it enough, but we have We have a bunch of great people behind the camera, and probably more so than in front of the camera. I would like to highlight one. His name's Daniel Costin. Can you get a shot of Daniel Costin? He wasn't ready for this, I'm sure, which makes it more fun. Daniel is a star photographer, and why I want to highlight him is Daniel is one of those loyal people that show up week after week, and not just at Carolina Business Review, but he is all over North and South Carolina taking pictures of events. He posts them, and he is one of those guys that you're glad to have on your team. Did you get a shot of that, Randy? Donna, did you make sure you got him on there? You can't find him? How convenient. As a photographer that's incommunicado. But anyway, Daniel, thank you for it. And I'd like to again thank our guests. If you have questions or comments about this program, CarolinaBusinessReview.org. It's a very long name, but it's worth it. If you go to that site, you'll see past programs. You can make comments, you can make suggestions, and we hope you will. So until next week on this program, I'd like to thank you for watching our program. Make a comment, watch our program, spread the good word, and happy summer. Until next week, I'm Chris William. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review provided by Martin Marietta, Colonial Life, the Duke Endowment, BARINGS, Grant Thornton, Sonoco, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, and by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit CarolinaBusinessReview.org.